One of the most confusing things about Next.js for people that have not used it, it is what kind of framework it is. Because it was known as a React framework, but isn't React frontend, so would Next.js also be that? And let's address that and go over concepts before creating the project. The answer to the question of what's Next.js is that it's a full stack framework, it runs its own server, and provides almost all of the UI functionalities in a similar manner to React. Additionally, it extends on those functionalities such as the routing feature, for example. And in Next.js, you can also define API routes or have a server by creating server actions and host those actions with your Next application, but you don't have to necessarily do so. Depending on the nature of client code, some of the client can be generated on server and rendered from it, and we will discover how to do so later in the tutorial where we talk about client and server components.
The requirements for setting up a development environment and getting it ready for Next.js are following. First, you're going to need to download and set up Node.js. If you go to their website, nodejs.org, and according to what operating system your computer has, you're gonna download and install it. The next is that you'll need an ID to run your code and run your server. This is optional. What I use and throughout this tutorial is Visual Studio Code. And once again, I suggest that you use that and you can go ahead to their website and download it. And the next we have, this is also optional, you don't need this to run code, it will just make your development faster, is this snippets or like extensions. Are these extensions that I have added on VS Code, where on the left menu you can select extensions and search exactly for them. The first one is this React Redux React Native snippets. What this helps you is, for example, when you start typing, you can select and create a sample component. It just saves time, so you don't have to define constant variable equals export and etc. The next we have ESLint. This just integrates ESLint into VS Code, and it uses just like checks lints your code. Next we have Prettier, which is a code formatter, and you can set up so that once you save the file, your code is formatted, meaning you're using the right amount of tabs and it looks just easier to read. Let's jump into creating the Next.js project. I have a terminal open right now, and once you navigate to the folder where you want your project to be created, go ahead and run npx create next app and the version number. If you go to the documentation of Next.js and see how to install, you'll see the word latest instead of the version number, which will automatically pick the latest version available. But using my version will have the benefit that if there is any difference in the newer versions compared to the one that I'm using right now, then you might get some conflict. So first we name the project, that would be Next.js Crash Course. We're going to select no for TypeScript, yes for ESLint, and also no for Tailwind since we want to focus only on Next.js in this tutorial, and yes for both source and app router. And if you're interested in Tailwind or any other technologies, you can check out my other videos. And now it's done, we get a success message that the app with the name we gave is created. Let's cd into the project, and from here we can start the application by running npm run dev, and it will run most likely on localhost 3000, or if that port on your computer is busy, it will display in the message which port it's using. We can copy that address. And if we paste it into a browser, this is the result we are going to get. And all of this like code, logos, images, and then this come from the page.js as it says over here. And let's go look into the code right now. I have the project open inside VS Code, which you can go by clicking VS Code and then File and Open, and then you select the folder for the project. And on the right side I have a diagram of all the folders or files we should pay attention to, and I'm gonna go over and explain the file. First we have this source folder in which we have a app router, and this is where you define your app's pages, the main index page where the code is coming from is page.js right now. You can define actions, components, and APIs also go inside there. Next up, we have a public folder, and this directory is used for static files like images, fonts, or other assets that you want to be served directly by Next.js without any processing. And the images used there, as the name suggests, it's public. So don't use any user-specific images, just something like logos and things that would be displayed on your landing page, for example. Next, we have node modules. This is all the modules that were installed to create this project, and later on, if you install any extra node modules using the command npm install, they will get stored in here. For example, you need a calendar picker, and you can browse the node modules on npmjs.org to customize further app and make use of the code that's already been written. And Next.js config is a configuration file that allows you to customize Next.js, such as add redirects, rewrites. I think server actions, when they were experimental, you can also mark here as true to start using it. And finally, we have package.json, and here you get the list for example, scripts. When you run npm run dev, what does it do in details? This part you won't necessarily need to remember and I think what it does, but later on it's good to know where to find what these commands mean. And inside dependencies, we have a list of all the things you would install. For example, like I mentioned, React Picker, or you can check if you go into the project in package.json what packages they're using that would go inside package.json. Now let's jump into writing code. So I'm going to go back in the VS Code and open the file that I mentioned. Contains all the code that we see in the browser. So inside page.js, I will delete all this code besides the main, like the container wrapper. And let's just add a header and like a title to this. So called landing page, and I'll say Next.js crash course. And once we hit the save to page.js, it should automatically reload the page on the browser and text should show up. And now let's see how we can create a new component. Usually I create components folder. This will be inside app folder. And here I'll create a new file, name it card.jsx because I'm creating a card component. Now I'll use my React snippets extension, array.fc, that should create like a simple component that just prints out card for us. So this is an export default. So the way we can import this in the page.js, I'm gonna make this bigger so you guys can see it better, and let me open this on the right side since I'll be making changes to the both. So first let's import in page.js, otherwise this will not automatically show up on our page. And I'm gonna add that below Next.js crash course text, and it has no arguments, so we add the closing tag. And here at the bottom of the page we see the card, because probably the styling is justify content, that's why it's on the bottom, but we'll fix that. Let's add some arguments known as props. We'll have two, title and description, because we don't want this card text hard-coded here. So instead we're gonna have past dynamic values, and this will be a reusable component. So first we'll take in the title variable, and afterwards we will have a description inside this paragraph tag. And because we updated this props, now nothing we're passing from page.js, so nothing shows up. But if we pass title as string text inside of the title, whatever we pass from page.js would show up as h3. And I'll add one of the topics that we're gonna cover, which is server-side rendering, as a title of the card. And as for the description, I'm just going to paste a text. So that's what we have. Let's go to the so this is the title coming in, and this is the description coming in, and if we navigate right now, we should be able to see both of them display here. And this looks very unstyled, so let's see how we can do styling as well. What I'm gonna use is like the modular base style. So for the card component, I'm gonna create a separate style component, card.module.css. If you want to import styles in that modular manner, we have to name the end of the file module.css. And here we start defining the classes and following the classes, the kind of styles and CSS that we want. And the first one is going to be just the general card component. So we mark that card and open brackets, and let's just add one property like border. Let's do 1 pixel solid, and with the color picker, I'm gonna pick a darker color. And once we have that, we'll add more styles later on, but just first let's import it and test it out, make sure CSS changes show up. So to import that, we go at the top of the component on the card.jsx and import styles. Styles are default imports and exports in this Next.js. And then we pass a class name. We do styles dot and the name of the class that we want to apply. In this case, we only have card. So let's do that and check how it looks like. So it does, the border does show up, and that's great. We can add now the further styling, for example, some paddings, margins, and etc. Border radius, let's also add that, but instead of 5 pixels, I'm going to do 15 pixels. Then we have a padding which we want to add. And now how can we create like further classes, for example, like a hover state? So that would be .card::hover, and this will just change a border color on hover. Now we want to style other components, for example, title and the text. And in traditional CSS, a lot of people do use this like dash as a separation, so card title. As for the gray text that show up, I'm using Copilot to make my development faster. But besides the suggested styles, I'm gonna add margin bottom, and also the color, I'm gonna make it blue-violet so that it pops out. And let's also add those styles, so class name equals and then styles and name. But in traditional CSS, we know that sometimes people use like this card-style, but in Next.js, since the styles is modular and CSS is kind of important, kind of like a like an object, it's better to use camel case, because if I save this, for example, card title, and go to the title, we are going to see the color of the title is still black, so the changes have not been applied. But if instead we change it to card and title together with the capital T instead, and also change on the CSS file and save that on both files. And I'm also going to add the same for the paragraph. Besides, instead of card title, it is going to be card text. And let's save that. And now we do see the changes and the styles are being applied together. All right, I'm going to increase a padding a little bit, set it to 30 instead. And I think so far that looks good. Now the next question is, what if I want to have more than one card? Do I have to keep creating more card components? But we don't necessarily need to do that. We can create a list of all the topics that we want to display and later on map it out. So let's create the array first. Constant topics is going to be an array. Every object is going to have a title and a description. So this is the first one that we already have, server-side rendering, and then the description. Let's do a few more, maybe like 2 more. And we get static site generation as a suggestion and a description for that one. And let's also do ISR. Now I'm gonna copy the variable name, which is topics, open curly brackets, and do topics.map. And inside map, we're going to take every single topic, every element. We're also going to take an index, and I'm going to remove the hard-coded, not hard-coded, but like the one card that we had. And so because we have multiple cards, we need to have a unique key. So index would be 0, it will start from 0, 1, go up to 2. And then we're going to take in title of every single element and the description of every single element, pass that on to props. So now as a result, we see the list and displayed and rendered every item has its own card. So that's more like dynamic approach if you have any kind of list. Now we want to apply the styling to not the cards, but itself the cards container. In that case, we create a div that wraps the cards, and we give it a class name styles dot, and then afterwards we're going to create a new class. I'm going to name this card container, and we have to remember that since we are inside page.js, the styles is coming not from the card, but from page module CSS already. We can go up at the top of the file to check if you are ever wondering where's the styles object coming from. And we go navigate to page.module CSS, which is inside app folder, and add this new class name that we created, card container. Inside here, I'm going to make a display grid, so we have our items displayed in a grid, and then we can define like rules around columns. I have grid template columns, and minimum value would be 3 pixels, and then one fragment would be on distribution of if it hits the minimum. And now that we have them together, we see that it needs a margin. So let me go back to the card module CSS, and inside the card I'll add some margin, 10 pixels. That should be sufficient, and that looks better.
Okay, now we have this components that's display information, title, and the description, and 3 of them for now. Let's learn how to create a new page, and then once we click these cards, it should redirect to that new page. So for creating the page, let's close out this components folder, and inside the app directory, we're going to create a new folder, and the name of the folder would be what the path of this page would be. So in this case, topic. And to actually create the page component, we name it page.js. That's how Next.js recognizes that this is a page. And create a sample, just like any other component, page is also a component. So let's create that. Always it should have export default. And yeah, for now, let's just make it display topic. So now if we navigate to /topic, it should take us to this one. As you notice, we have the text in the top right corner, and then this gradient background. I think it's coming from global CSS file, and let's remove it. So we move that body gradient, and now it's gone. We just have this white background, and we can, I think there's nothing else. We can close out this one and go back to our component.
Now we are on a topic page, but we do have multiple topics, so we can just have one page or create topic 1, topic 2, 3, etc. inside our code. That would obviously not be efficient, and we need something like topic, and then we slash say the title of the topic or its unique ID. If you go to like an e-commerce store, maybe you get shoes and then specifically with the name of the sneaker or etc. So something like identifier and dynamic. So to create this dynamic routes in Next.js, what we'll need is inside the topic folder, we'll create a new folder, and to mark that it's dynamic, we use brackets and we say topic name. For example, if it's an ID, you name it topic ID, and inside here we create a new file, page.js. We can actually rename this to be topics instead. And so what would be the best use case for this is that we list all the topics when we navigate to the topics page, and then we have unique topics once we go into specifically the page of the topic. And in here we can copy what we have for a sample code for the page, and in here we need to access this name so that we display more information, we customize our page according to that. And to be able to access the name, we will need to do that using the params, and then we pass in the name of the params. So for example, now if we console log topic name. So if I come back here and after the topic, so we have topics first, then the topic name, I'm gonna come up with topic name, maybe like server. And let's go here, and to be able to see like nothing changes here because we have the same code, but it should show up the name in the console. And to open the console you can go, and let's reload this, and we do see I reloaded a couple of times but server shows up now. I'm gonna open this further to this side. If we do a different topic like blockchain, then we're gonna get that. And let's also update here so it shows us the topic name. Now let's say that our main homepage has a header, something that says maybe logo at the top, and we want our topics page to also share that header. This won't be efficient if we go through every page and add the header code at the top of it, right? So that is where layout comes in. Depending on which folder the layout is, it would apply to all the pages inside it. So let's first take a look at our main layout, which is directly in the app folder. It just has a metadata, so that information will be shared throughout our whole application. And it wraps our code into the HTML, and then next up we have a body, and then we change and pass along this children. So you always need layout to have children, so it displays the code that is coming from page.js. But if we create a layout nested, for example, inside topics, then it would apply to all the pages that go through this topics route. So let's create a component for the header and use it on this layout so it will be shared throughout, and then we can create another one and make it specific to make it nested to topics as well. So new file header.tsx, and create a React component. I don't know. Oh, sorry. This should be JSX. We're not using TypeScript in here. And what I will do now, let's do header and Next.js. Instead I'll name Next.js course. Let's create a style file for this header.module.css. Import styles. Great, and let's name this class name styles.header wrapper. Okay, so two classes, header wrapper and header logo. Let's mix this with 100%. Display, I'm going to do flex and justify content. Since we only have one, I'll do at the start. And as for the logo, let's do font weight bold. and a bigger font. Save it. Now let's import in the layout. Oh, I forgot. I'm gonna add border at the bottom, 1 pixel, solid, dark color. Okay. Import header from components, and let's place this inside the body but above the children. Okay, so we do see here, and then if we also navigate to just the topics page, it should be there, as well as just the local host 3000. I'm also going to add a padding to this header. Let's do 30 pixels. Okay, so now, as you noticed, when I go move from one page to another, I type in the URL, but let's learn how to programmatically navigate inside our code in between pages and how to create links for that. And the great use case for creating a link would be in the header itself. So when somebody presses Next.js course, they come back to the home page. So for that, we are going to go at the top of header JSX, first import link, then we'll turn our h1 into a link, and link href props in a link is always required, and it takes in an address, which we can measure how, like, what's the, for the main page, it's always like slash, and you can see from app how many, I guess the page, what's the route of the page here. We have, if we want to go here, it's directly in the page. If we want to go to topics, it's going to be /topics and etc. So now that we are on the topic page, if we hover over, we see already the cursor changes, and if we click, we get back to the main page. Now we are going to create a layout that is only specific to the topics pages, and creating a new file, we always have to name that layout. And let's do export default function. This would be topic layout, and it should take in children. And we'll return children, close this out, and we don't need main because we already have main on our other layout. Let's save this. We won't be seeing any changes just yet because we haven't added any logic or other code in here. And I'm going to create a new component for the topic layout. Let's do new file, and this time we're doing breadcrumbs. So let's save this and import in components. If we add that in here, it will just show not on the main page, but if we go to topics, we see it here. Now what we want to do in breadcrumbs is that if we are on a specific topic, let's say AI or etc., we want to show that we are inside, kind of like breadcrumbs in websites work, that we are inside topics, and then we are inside a specific topic. So if somebody wants to navigate back to the topics, they are able to do so. And for that, we first need to take in parameters, and we can also access the params coming in from the path here in the. If we add another argument inside after the children, this argument is optional, and let's say if we want to this structure and just have a topic name, right? And then we can pass topic name to our breadcrumbs. Let's add that as props in here. And we can do span topics, another span for this icon, and the third one would be the topic name and closing. Okay. So we have topics and then we have AI. Let's just fix the styling for this one. Okay, let's start with the outer container first, and that is going to be and we're going to make display flex, and flex direction by default is row. We don't need flex wrap. Let's also set the gap to 2 so that there's enough space, or maybe even 1, between the flex items, which would be topics, and then AI. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna open this to the right and import. First thing, import styles from here, and let's make this class name. And because this is a span, it does not act as a... Let's restart this, and also I'm gonna open a terminal, and what I see is that I may have, there's like a warning that I have an incorrect value inside the header module, and I think it's because of the justify content. It has to be flex start, so I think that should fix our... Let's rerun this again, and okay, put this to 100%. And let's also do the styling for the link, which later on we're gonna turn this topics and then AI into the link. And let's see, I just wanna add the color, and I'm just gonna pick from, maybe let's do blue violet again. Let's save that, and back to the breadcrumbs. So we have, this would be a link. Href would equal to just topics. Let's close this one out. And class name would be styles.link. Okay, and as for AI, we're already on the AI and we don't need another link. Oh, I think I saved that one instead. It should be in the breadcrumbs module. Save that. And let's do text decoration underline. Alright. Now I'm going to add one more style, but this would go inside global CSS because I want to keep reusing that style, and this would be for a container, so that would be, and I'll set max width to 1200 pixel and margin auto, so by default it is centered. And now if we go to breadcrumbs component and add this class. So the styling should be applied. Let's see. Container max width 1200 pixels. Oh, that's interesting that this falls out of the div. Oh, because this is part of the page. Alright, we can go to the page, remove this. And let's also make this as a part of container. And instead display the topic name inside of breadcrumbs. But once we delete the topic name from the page, we can see that breadcrumbs does not display it because for it, even though we have it in the code, it is undefined. Now, if we go back to wherever breadcrumb is used, which is in the layout, we do see that it takes in the topic name that's coming from props and then passes to the topic name. But the issue is that also the layout doesn't receive it. Why is that? Because this layout is defined outside of this folder. So this layout would only have props that are part of like topics. So if we move this and have a nested layout, then we do have access for the props in this path. And then all the parameters that come into the layouts are equivalent to which folder and which path this layout is defined in. So once again, if we take this in and move it in here, we would have to maybe update imports, yes, and make sure if it doesn't, your VS Code doesn't update it, to update this import for the breadcrumb, otherwise you're gonna get an error. Let's save that, and now AI appears because we do have access for the topic name here inside layout.js. More thing here, which would be just the margins on the CSS and okay, and that looks better. I'm gonna make the gap smaller, maybe 0.3, perfect. Now let's move on to the data fetching, and we'll fetch data, and with the data we'll pass a topic that we want to fetch data above, and we'll generate article. So there's like 4 different ways to fetch data in Next.js. You can do it inside server component, you can create a server action that fetches data and use that in your components. You can do it in route handlers, which is basically creating an API. If you use third-party APIs, you can also create APIs in your Next.js project. And you can also fetch data in client components using a third-party libraries. And as an example, we'll use OpenAI API. So if you navigate to OpenAI website and then you need to create your account, I think initially you get like some credit so you can use their API for free. And then if you navigate to API keys and create a new secret key and copy that, that is what we're going to use to authorize to basically sign the request that we'll be making. Without the API key, we won't be able to access their API. Just of keeping API keys secret, we shouldn't directly put it in the code, because let's say if you upload it to GitHub or if you just publish it and put in client component, you can actually leak your API keys, which is not a safe option. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new file, .env.local, which is your environment variables file, and I'll create a new variable, OpenAI API key, and that equals to, and here you can paste your API key. Now, once we do that, if you're already running the application, you'd have to stop and restart it because it only reads, actually, reload. I think it reloaded itself. Okay. Um, Maybe they changed that. And so it reads the environments from now. It can read that we added env local file, which wasn't there before. Let's look into OpenAI documentation and see how we can get this create chat completion is what we're going to use, and the way we'll pick to do the data fetching would be inside a server component. So let's copy the URL for this completions. And first, like, what is server component? Any component that you create inside app folder in Next.js when you're using app router by default would be a server component. And in order to fetch data, we're going to make these components async, but we'll get to that. So let's go wherever we have topics, let's say. And inside here, we can do make this async. Then let's define a API URL, and this would equal to, we have to put, this is a string, so we have to put that in the quotes. And what else? This gives us information. We're gonna fetch this using the fetch API, which is also, it extends to server components. So we will do await, right? Fetch API URL, and then inside here we pass what we like configuration. So the type of request, as we see here, is post request. So we do method post, and then we pass in headers, which would be content type is application JSON as they have it here. Here they have a curl command. You can also pick other options. So that's that. And then for the authorization, we do need OpenAI API key. And then once we save this OpenAI API key variable in the .env files, the way we access that is process.env and then the variable. Here we put beer in front of it the way they have it. And then in order to put like variable inside this string to combine the two, we use this like $sign and brackets. We close the headers, and then they also have model is required to pass. So we're just gonna use this, the one they have in the example, and that we can pass as a body. And when we pass body, we also always have to take the JSON and stringify it because we can't send objects directly. It has to be a string. So from the prompt, let's just first test and make an API call. And max tokens. Oh, it says it takes in the messages. And add a comma here. We have to close this one. Then instead of prompt, we do messages as they have here in the documentation. And finally, let's get the result. Then response equals JSON, and let's do console log data, and then if there's any errors, catch the errors and also console log them. Now if we go here, open the terminal, we do see that we got back data item, so chat completion model, and then gave us some choices, some message, etc. So the request was successful, otherwise you would not return the data back. Now let's make this request more fit to our use case, because here we just passed like a default message, and instead we want to make it dynamic, and we want to take in the topic name and tell the API to just generate an article or blog regarding that topic. And let's do role system user rewrite blog posts, and in here let's do topic name, and oops, oh, I see there was an extra curly bracket here. Let's save that. And also let's add the header about the topic name, and add a paragraph that we don't need. Maybe here's a blog post about. We are just gonna add directly the. And in order to be able to access the response that we console logged here, we would have to save this response in a constant variable instead. So I'm just gonna remove this and add constant response equals to await fetch, and then we need to do another await to get the data, and then that equals to response.json. And we save this, we make this conditional. So if we have data, then what we're gonna do is take the data, and here we have also like a sample response. So we have choices, and we're gonna, it's an array, we're gonna pick the first index of the array, and then we have a message, so choices, message, and then content. Okay, let's see if that works out. And we do get the text, we get title, and then the text about the blog post, and it's describing what we'll explore, and etc. Now as we go back to our landing page, let's also update this cards. So once we click on the cards, we go to the new page for like the topic, and we also generate an article about them. So this was on main file, and let's go into the card, import link in here, and we're going to turn this card into a link that has an href, starts with topics, and then we pass title. I'm gonna save. And once we go here throughout the event tutorial, if you ever get an error, it's always we should go to the terminal, and if it's coming from OpenAI, we are console logging that error, so it will show up here. So now this is telling me that I exceeded my current quota, which was like the free version, and I have to like check the plan and upgrade billing to continue doing that. So if you ever come across this and don't know where it's coming from, make sure to check your logs. It's always a good practice, whether or not it relates to OpenAI. So once I update my plan, this should go through. Let's try that. And if we open our page up and click one of those cards, we're gonna get this page, and what we'll notice is that wherever we had space, like server-side rendering, it adds this hash. So let's replace that, because we might have titles with more than one word that has the spaces. We can use a little bit of regular expression and say formatted title that equals to title that we can use this JavaScript function replace, and so I was thinking of using this. We don't need to do lowercase, and after this let's create a link URL that would be topics and formatted title, and then we're gonna take this URL and place it in here. Let's save that, and if we click here, then we see that this spaces instead get updated as like a slash. Let's move on to and understand client components. So for every component that we created was a server component, because as I mentioned in the app router, in the app folder, by default, if we create a component and unless we mark at the top of the file using the keyword use client, it is going to be a server component. And why do we need client components? Anytime we need some kind of interactivity, for example, user clicks a button, we need to update a state. If you're somewhat familiar with React and you use state, then you need to use client component. You use any kind of effects, use effect, etc. Or you have a listeners that listen to certain kind of events. That's where client comes in. And another benefit of the client is that it has access to browser APIs. For example, you ask a user if you can use their location, and that could be done from here, geolocation and local storage. But anytime you want to fetch the data, as I mentioned, whether you want to directly access the database or you want to fetch the data from third-party API, security is added benefit that's provided by the server, because the tokens and API keys are not leaked onto the client and they are secure since they're on the server. And for the SEO and performance reasons, if you, for example, fetch the data on the server and that's bundled up, that's better for the SEO for machines like that of Google's algorithm to read it, and etc. Now let's go back to the code and create a client component. We are going to add a client component on this page in here, and that's going to be a search bar. What do we need for search is, as user types it in, we're going to update the selections here, so it would be indeed interactive. And I'm gonna go ahead, create component here. Let's name this search bar.jsx. Let's save this, and before we make any further changes, I'm gonna go ahead and import to our main page. Let's place that inside here. See what's going to happen if we use state here and not mark it as a client component. So right now search bar is a server component. So if I say constant user input set user input that equals to use state, we are going to get an error. And it says that it only works in a client component, but none of its parents are marked as use client, so they're server components by default. So what do we learn from here? That also if we mark search bar as a client component, then its children can also be a client component. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Now the error is gone and we can use the state. So instead of saying this search bar, let's do search for topics. And we are going to do input type equals text. So if we save this, input would show up and we can start typing in, but we want to capture what the user is typing in, so that's where the value comes from. Value would equal to user input, and then set on change. We're gonna take the event and set user input to event.target.value. Okay, so now if we start typing, the state is getting updated. Now to be able to filter this list based on the selection made here, we would need to somehow have access to the query that was in here. But right now, when we have this state created, only search bar has access to it. So another way we can do that is to create a state from here, or create a function that would be called from the search bar to filter out the results. So let's take this. First import use state from React. Then we have to make this a client component as well. Then we can add this in here. And we can say constant filtered topics. So previously, if you used use effect to make like dependencies, so let's say if user input gets updated, we update the topics, etc. Right now, the good thing is that we don't need that. We can just it's recommended actually to directly update the state if you're able to do so. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say filter topics, topics.filter, and if topic includes in the title this user input, then return that. And we're going to take this, replace our just the UI element with it, and save it. So then we need to pass user input to search bar. And then let's name it on input change that equals to set user input. And now we're gonna get an error because we need this to come from here. This would be a function, set user input, takes in the input, and change. We're gonna call this, we're gonna remove this, and user input on input change. Okay. User should be fine. Okay, so if I type in SER, we're only gonna get server-side rendering, and if we remove that, we get all the results back. Now let's just update the styling of this one a little bit. So that's the search bar, new file, search bar.module.css. So we're gonna have search container, display flags, column, align items center, justify also center. Then I'm gonna do search input, and I'm gonna add some padding. Let's do 10 pixels. Border radius. Okay, let's do max width. And shadow, can we do shadow like this? Box shadow. and maybe some margin. Let's split this to right, import styles. So we're gonna have search container in here, and then search input inside here. Let's see what we have. Okay, I think the shadow is a little bit too dark. Oops. Okay, and then let's remove this, I think the justify content on the page. Styles, let's jump into main. Oh, not that main. Huh, interesting. That's better, and we can even add gap.
That would be it for the tutorial. To quickly recap, the concept that we covered are setting up the development environment, creating Next.js project. We went over file structure, we created components, set up pages and routing, and discovered ways to fetch the data, and also differences between client and server components. And the next question that you might have is that would learning Next.js be sufficient to build full stack apps? And unfortunately, the answer is no, because full stack applications in most cases need authentication, authorization, ORM. Sometimes and not always migrations, then there's security, different kinds like role based, API based, also file uploads. All of this can be integrated in Next.js and configured, and there are different packages that can help you achieve those functionalities, but you will still need to know how to work with those various tools and how to pick them. For example, for file upload, you need the storage bucket. The standard is S3, but depending what you use as a backend, in case it's a Firebase, then it makes sense for you to use storage bucket provided by Firebase. And while we're on the topic of storage buckets, Vercel has developed some of the functionalities that I mentioned very recently, for example, Vercel Blob, but I haven't personally used them yet, so I won't be able to provide an opinion. But I have shared full stack tutorials where I built full stack apps and integrated all parts of the applications that I mentioned using the tech stack I have used working in the industry. And I can recommend following those because usually companies are not as quick to jump on the newest tools that are in alpha development because of not enough testing around and also skill set. So if you're on the market, I recommend you check out those tutorials following like the established tools. And thank you so much for watching this crash course, and I'll see you in the next video.